Hey YouTube, what's up? Mike here with Step by Step. Today we're going to do HTTP requests using URLSession. So this is something in Swift. You're going to need to do this a lot in any mobile app development, which is call a remote database via these APIs. Some of them, you want to post data or get data. We're going to go through both of those two things. And first let's go over the steps. So step one is to get the API keys. So for the first one, let me show you what we're going to work on. We're going to work on the Norris API, and we're going to use Pastebin for our other one. And if you go to Pastebin, you sign up for an account, which I already have, and you click this API button right here, it'll give you your API key on the screen and with some pretty good documentation on what needs to be done. Now, it's okay if you don't understand it yet. We're going to work through it. I'm not clicking this because I spent an hour on my last video about AlmoFire and Swifty JSON, which are third-party frameworks. AlmoFire is essentially just a wrapper for URLSession. But in that video, I spent like an hour blurring out all the instances of my API key, so I'm just not going to go there right now. And we're going to add any needed additional variables using URLRequest, like parameters, headers. We'll see how to do that later. Create an instance of URLSession, which is just a let constant. Create a dataTask with the doCatch block to handle the data. Or if it's in the response format, usually the documentation will tell you, but I'll show you how to handle that as well. And then we serialize and format the data, usually a JSON, sometimes it's a string, if it's just one value that you get back. And we're going to do error handling, and then I always forget this, so I just added it, is .resume at the end of the function, because you don't think to put that at the end of a completion handler. But anyways, stop making excuses for myself, forgetting things, and let's get started. So this is the final version, which is available on GitHub. What I'd like you to do is take the starter branch, clone it to your machine, download it via zip. The link's in the description. And in it you can see that I have a view controller here that has one screen here for Chuck Norris facts, and then one view below for a text box and a submit to Pastebin button. So as you might have guessed, this is linked up to an IB action that is Chuck button pressed, and here we're going to put the Chuck Norris API call, and here we're going to put the posting to Pastebin. And the Chuck label, Pastebin text field, all that stuff set up. It's pretty obvious what those are, here and here. So yeah, let's get started with the Chuck Norris one. And for this one, we don't need to pass in any parameters. What we need to do is create a guardlet for the URL, because URL is an optional and we want to wrap it properly. And then in here we're going to put the string link. There we go. And then else, because this is rare, we really don't want this to happen, and it's crucial to the app. So we're going to throw a fatal error, and in there we're going to put error getting Chuck Norris URL. There we go. So now we have the URL. We're going to create an instance of the URLSession, and this is how to do that. Let session equals URLSession.shared. After that, we're going to go to the next step, start session.dataTask, and you want to do the one with the completion handler at the end. So we're going to go dataTask with URL completion handler. And then if you're not familiar with completion handlers, they're really important in Swift. So yeah, make sure to check that stuff out. So you want data, response, error. And if you aren't familiar, so all that happens is when this is called, this being the closure / completion handler, this is going to be what is performed. So that's basically all you need to know for now. And this stuff comes back in the form of data, and the data comes back in the form of JSON. So JSON is JavaScript object notation, very commonly used as far as like passing internet data. It's kind of a universal format. So it is something that you need to be familiar with and know how to deal with. And thankfully, Apple has a great developer blog post about, let me find it right here, yeah, about working with JSON in Swift. Now, in the final repo, the final branch, I have put examples of these two in there, so you have that just to look at if you need it. But you know, I bookmarked this. This is really valuable because you also can create classes and structs and link them up with the JSON data if you want to move it around. Really useful stuff here. But I digress. Let's get back to dealing with the data. So what we're going to do is say if let data equals data, and then I want to create an instance for the JSON, and it's going to be let JSON, and we have to try JSON serialization dot JSON object. So now you see why I said try, because JSON object will throw if there's an issue. It will throw an error. So what we also need to do is wrap it in a do catch block. And then we'll put that in here. Side note, if you ever like cut and paste, it will automatically do indenting for you in Xcode, the proper way it needs to be indented. Otherwise, there's a neat little keyboard trick that is, so you select all with Command A, and then Control, and then I, letter I, and it'll indent everything in your app to the proper level or whatever. You know what I mean? So JSON serialization with data, and for options, we're just going to do the default, which is empty brackets. And in here, as seen in the blog post that I just showed, we're going to do an if let for the dictionary because it's given, JSON gives key value pairs back. So we're going to say if let dict equals JSON as string any. And in here, this is just for getting a single value. So I'm going to say for single values. Single values. And in here, I'm going to say if let value equals dicts with the key value. So where am I getting this from? If you open up the documentation for Chuck Norris, which is not that one, it is, yeah, whatever. We'll just go there. You can see that the value is the actual joke. So let's minimize this, and we want this value here, and we want it as a string. So we're going to say self.chuckLabel because we're in a closure, and in closures you always have to make this stuff explicit by using self when you're referring to the view controller. And then we want to make the text that value. So here's a little more complicated topic. And so this stuff is running behind the scenes. URLSession is running in the background of your app. So in order to do something like changing the chuck label.txt, we have to move it to the main queue, essentially. So in order to do that, we have to do dispatch queue.main.async, because if you run it this way, it's not going to work. It's going to tell you to do this, basically. So in dispatch queue, make that happen. So now this should work. Let's do a little bit of error handling before we build and run and check this out. So in the catch block, we want to print the error, which is this error up here. We don't have a response in this one. The response is in the form of this data. Usually the API will tell you how it's going to respond, what it's going to give you. So yeah, we're good to go here. That's the end of the URL session data task. So we want to resume. And I mean, for real, guys, if you're having a problem, you probably missed this. I don't know about you guys, but I do this all the time where I forget to put resume there. And I'm going through the app like, oh my God, what did I do? Like, screwed something up. Oh. But whatever. I digress. Let's build and run. So if you click get Chuck Norris facts, one spinning back fist punch by Chuck Norris will make your liver quiver and your spleen scream. Although, I mean, spinning back fists usually go to the face, right? I don't know. I've seen a couple UFC fights, so I'm probably a martial arts expert, right? Oh, get your political stuff out of here. Chuck Norris once punched Jean-Claude Van Damme in his career. It's more of a knock on that guy. I don't care. But yeah, these jokes are, stabbed in out. That's kind of funny. Some of these are really funny. You just kind of have to mind them. Can eat fire and air. That's kind of cool. But whatever, it works. That's the point, is that it works. And this can be used for a lot of different things. If you want to check out the final repo, you can see ways to extract multiple values and to extract nested values. But actually, I'd recommend you just, how to do that? I recommend you just check out this blog if you're working with JSON and Swift, because chances are you need more than one data point, or you need nested data points, or you need arrays, like all this stuff. This blog is the best resource I've found that's just succinct and complete with different use cases. And always check Stack Overflow, of course. But we're done with that one. So give yourself a little pat on the back. Now, next we're going to move over into Pastebin, which is the other website I showed earlier. And let me bring that up for you. Here we are on the API page. I scrolled down a little bit to get away from the API key. But here's the important stuff. They showed some examples in curl, but we're going to do it in Swift. So here's the some of the stuff you need. And if you scroll up a little bit, it'll say that make sure everything is in UTF-8 format, which is important for this. That's how it wants the parameters passed in. That's how it would want headers passed in if there were. There's not headers in this one. But just keep that in mind. to read the documentation, especially the top where it's usually put the most important things. So here we are. And this is a post request instead of a GET request. So you do have to go in to the URLRequest and change things. And we're going to do that right now. These are the required parameters. So let's go ahead and create an instance of these parameters. And as I mentioned before, the inputs are in string UTF-8 format. So a lot of times you're going to want to do it in JSON format. And you're going to make like an array of dictionaries, basically, and use the JSON serialization that we used earlier to pass in parameters. So again, in the final repo, there is code if you wanted to do it that way, because I tried it that way first and didn't notice, I make mistakes too. I didn't notice that, they needed it in string format. So let's put it in string format. So we have, these are going to be parameters. So for short, I'm just going to say params. And the 3 that are required per the site were the ones that we saw earlier. The first one of which is API dev key. This is the one that you sign up for. And then I'm going to put your API key here. So you can fill that out yourself. And then and is going to be the separator for these. And then we're going to say API underscore option equals paste. I'm going to throw another and in there. And I say API underscore paste code. And we're going to, I need to make sure that says equals. And then we're going to use that text field. So Pastebin text field dot text. And this is an optional, of course, because it can return nothing. And so if it returns nothing, let's add a default value. And that default value would be no text added or something like that. And there we go. Those are the parameters for passing in. Now let's do the same. Guard let URL equals URL from a string. And that string is also at the top of that Pastebin website. I'm going to copy and paste it in here. And there we go. Else, of course, we need else clause. And we're going to do fatal error. Pastebin URL not working. Perfect. Now, we have to add these parameters into our project somehow. So we're going to create what's called a URL request. And that is add-on basically to URLSession. It'll be a URL request with the URL of this. And so the URL request, if you want to look at the documentation, it's actually, there's not much detail on it. Nowhere near as much as that blog post I just showed or something like that. But, Apple's kind of, sometimes their documentation leaves a little bit to be desired. But this is a post because we're posting to the internet, of course. So say request.http method. And in order to make it a post, we just do post. And then request.http body, which this is where you'd pass in parameters. Headers are a little bit different. You would use request.addValue string for header field. But that's, if you need to do that. Some sites, some APIs do it as headers, some as parameters. So just so you know. And in this HTTP body, it's a tough one. We're going to say params.data because it's expecting data using string.encoding.etf UTF-8. There we go. So now we should be able to do everything pretty similar to how we did before. Let session. Well, actually, you know what? If you want to pause the video right here and try to do it yourself, but this time our data is in the format of string. So, you know, you can check Stack Overflow, see how to take that data, turn it into a string, or, you know, see how all that works, because we have to print out, it's going to return the URL that our paste is located at so we can see the text that we typed on Pastebin. So it's just in the form of one string. It's not JSON like we did up there. So it's a nice little challenge. See if you can do it. And we're back. So we're going to do let session equal URLSession dot shared, just like before. Session dot dataTask with a URL, but we're not going to use the URL. We're going to use URLRequest, which is request. And then we're going to do the same data response error. And then here in the code, we're going to do the same if let data equals data. And this is where it gets a little different. We're kind of doing the reverse of what we did up here with the encoding. And we're going to say if let data string equals string data. Doesn't do autocomplete right here, which is weird. Encoding string.encoding.utf8, and we're going to print data string. There we go. So maybe outside this if let we could put a else, just so we can print an error if such thing happens. Just to, you know, cover our bases here. Let's just, you know, can't be too careful. There we go. And don't forget resume, like I do all the freaking time. Let's run. We're going to say hello world, submit to Pastebin, and invalid API dev key. So yeah, I'm just going to, you know, copy and paste that in here and see if it works. Okay, so I copied and pasted my key in there. Let's build and run again. Boom. And here is a link right here. I'm going to copy and paste that into the internet here. And it says, hello world. So that's kind of cool, right? And hopefully you ended up getting all this stuff right. Hopefully you're not this guy over here that's saying these words, these expletives. Yeah, I've been known to do it from time to time when my code's not working. You know, there we are. We're done. We're good. If you have any questions, the first step, because it's hard, I'm working like all the time between doing Uber right now to pay the bills while I'm looking for an iOS dev job, as well as studying for job interviews, going on job interviews, making these videos, and the Swift Life podcast, which is on all podcast networks, wherever you get your podcasts. But yeah, so I'm kind of busy right now. The first thing I'd do, or say to do, is to download this repo and check out the final branch and compare your results and see if you're doing anything wrong. Also ask Stack Overflow, because it's just hard for me to get back to you right now. Hopefully I'll have more time, because I really do love you guys and appreciate you watching my stuff, and I hope that this made you just a little bit better at Swift. And if you like my stuff and want to get even better, like this video and subscribe, and I'll put out more stuff pretty much weekly. So yeah, peace.